big thank you to museum expert community for inviting me. So Rita was really instrumental in making this happen, and I'm very grateful to Rita. We had the opportunity to work through this along with a couple of the facilitators, Jody and Chris, in the summer of 20, so right after the pandemic started. And I know that it has been very helpful to the three of them. And so being able to present this in a webinar format is terrific, and I'm really excited to be here. Thanks also to Walter for the kind introduction, and to Colleen, who have done so much to help me prepare for this, to understand your community and what you are seeking to learn from this. So if I get anything wrong, that's entirely my understanding, no lack of prep on anybody else's part. And as Walter said, I am happy to take questions as we go through this. So you can either put those into the chat or raise your hand. And I don't have a great view of everybody's screen at the moment. So I'm going to ask again if Colleen could just interject if questions or hands are raised, and I will be glad to stop and answer those. So this topic, change your mindset to design your life, this is not something that I can take credit for. I did not originate this principle or this concept. This comes from, or is really inspired by, a couple of professors at the Stanford Design School. And they are influenced by the work of Parker Palmer, who wrote a book called, oh shoot, now I'm blanking on it. I'll come back to that in a moment. But Parker Palmer's work influenced them, and they realized that they could apply the principles of design to building a life. And so it's a really novel kind of premise, and incorporated with the coaching work that I do, I think is a really nice way to think about what we do and how we do it a little bit differently. So we take a step back and we take a more holistic view. I know a lot of you out there are looking for new careers, looking to get into or out of the museum industry, thinking about what else is possible. And so this is a, I would say, approach that can enable that. And then, as Walter also mentioned, we are going to do this more as a mini workshop format because I would be shortchanging you if we didn't actually practice what it is to do design theory. So design theory is not just me talking at you and learning what it is. It is an engaging process. So we're going to model that. It's meta. It should be fun. And all you have to do is talk a little bit about yourselves. So you're already expert on the topic that we're going to discuss. So getting right into it, I love this quote from Einstein: "No problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it." So what does this mean? This means that if we approach something like a job search and our mindset is really wrapped around, gosh, I need a job, you know, we're going to continue to look for a job the way that we've always done that, the way that is kind of problem focused. The problem is, I don't have a job, I need a job, I want a job. And so we're not changing any perspective. And then if we're not successful in that endeavor, or it's not going quite the way that we would like it to, we just kind of keep perseverating and perpetuating what it is that we've been doing. So design helps us to take a step back and create a little more perspective for our careers, for our lives, to look at what we're doing a little bit differently, and ultimately optimize that so that we're not kind of in that repetitive rut of doing the same thing over and over. So what I really want to do is just jump right on in to designing. Before I share anything else about the mindsets, about what it is, you can do it, we can all do it. And what I want to talk about is beliefs about work. So the first principle of design thinking is that we have to get curious. And getting curious, when we apply it to our lives, starts with getting curious about ourselves, about our assumptions, about these truths that we hold. And we might never have thought about, what do we believe about work? We just know we have to work. We know there's things we're interested in. We know we have these degrees or these skills. And though, you know, what does it really mean? What are my beliefs that I hold about what work is? You know, some of the beliefs that I hold or have held in the past are things like, I believe work should be fulfilling. I believe that career success equals happiness. I believe that degree determines career. And so when we think about that, we can see how some of our actions then move from that place of our beliefs. So this is the first step of the design process, is sort of getting clear on what that is and beginning to be able to look at this in a new light. So what I'd like to invite everyone to do, and if you saw the LinkedIn or anything that Rachel did, and thank you for that, Rachel, you might have already seen this seated, but go into the chat and use the chat to type out a couple beliefs that you have about work, whatever those are for you. And the reason I want you to put these in the chat is twofold. One is that we're going to refer back to this a little bit later. And the other is, you know, because these things do tend to be these truths that we really hold for ourselves, sometimes we might not even know them or be able to access them. So seeing other people's can kind of help, and it might prompt us and trigger us. So I'm going to be quiet for just a moment and allow you to start using the chat and typing in some of those beliefs you hold about work. All right, love it. Define identity, fulfilling. Training. Work part of the solution. Ooh, that's fun. Fulfilling, serving, dynamic, contributing, noble. Enhancing ourselves, earn enough money to support, healthy work-life balance, challenging us, better versions of ourselves, be in balance, best foot forward, part of life, but not entire life. Ooh, you are not enough if you don't have the occupation. Can only dislike 20%. Work should have purpose you believe in. This is great. You all dove right into that question. I love it. So it seems like the chat is winding down a little bit. Oh, be an expert, making progress, moving forward. You're welcome to keep typing things in. Like I said, we are going to refer back to these. You can make a little note for yourself too. That's totally fine. But that is awesome. I love how quickly and how deeply you all got to some of these beliefs or truths that you hold about that. So now I want to take a little opportunity, now that we have just engaged in design thinking. So congrats, you're already all design thinkers. I want to take a quick moment to talk about what is design thinking, and then why are we doing it here in the context of this workshop and career, when, you know, oftentimes when we think about design, we're thinking about product design, we're thinking about consumers. So a sort of definition of design thinking is that it is a non-linear iterative process that people use to understand the needs of consumers, to challenge assumptions, to redefine problems, and to create innovative solutions. So here on the screen, I have written that it's a way of addressing big, ambiguous, human-centered problems. What is more human-centered than us ourselves? The questioning already identified that it is a process of asking questions rather than just moving towards solution, that we're really looking at a big picture. and that it is iterative, experimental. So designers build their way forward. And you'll probably hear me say that more than once in the course of this webinar. This is not about, here to there overnight. It is along the way. So maybe this is best represented by an example. So let me share an example, and this again comes from the product design world, but I think it'll give you the idea of what it looks like when we take that step back and the types of questions that we're asking and how they solve big ambiguous problems. So Bell Laboratories and Motorola. The technology for mobile phones has been around since the 1920s. This is something I recently learned. It used to be that trolleys were able to have mobile communication between one another, and the technology wasn't great. So telecommunications companies were looking for ways of developing better methods of creating communication between vehicles. So that started, of course, with mass transit vehicles, but then the car started taking over. And so their emphasis switched to how do we make our communication better between cars? So vehicle to vehicle communication. So it's the 1960s now, and Bell Laboratories is working on this, and other people are working on this. We need a better car phone is in essence, or how do we create a better car phone? How do we create better technology so car phones are better? And then Motorola enters the game. And rather than saying, how do we create better vehicle to vehicle communication, they start asking the question, how do we help people better communicate? How do we help them communicate more often wherever they might be? Well, that opens up an entirely new perspective, right? So instead of limiting it to the vehicle, they're now saying, what do we do just for people? And in what ways would people want to be connected? And how is this valuable to individuals? And so they come up with this, the first iteration of the cell phone. And maybe you've seen this in a museum. You probably didn't have one, I'm guessing, because this actually ended up not being that popular. Even though it is technically portable, you can see it's huge. It's about the size of a shoebox. And it did allow that kind of technology, that kind of connection. However, it required successive iteration to get to the flip phone that many of us remember from the 90s. And then, of course, we all know how much iteration has occurred since then that has led to the creation of, these little pocket computers that we carry everywhere. But it was really that process of asking the question of how do people stay better connected that allowed Motorola to create this huge advancement, whereas Bell Laboratories was keeping their solution really oriented around cars. But what does this mean when we apply it to us and we apply it to job seeking? So if we think about the traditional approach to job seeking, and I'm sure you've all been there at some point in time, and maybe many of you are there right now, the traditional approach tends to be, I need a job. So the solution is, I'm going to find a job. And the process is what the process we know to be. I'm going to write resumes and submit them and hope I get past the algorithms and hope I get to a human and get to some interviews. And it's a pretty rote process, and it's what you think you need because you're solving for, I need a job. Back to that Einstein quote about the level of consciousness that created it, right? So it's kind of blinders. And maybe the worst part about this is that you're really at someone else's mercy. You are trying to persuade someone via these pieces of paper that you are the right candidate for this job. And it is tedious, right? Like even talking about this, I don't even like it. It's tedious and it kind of makes me sick to my stomach. So then we take the design approach, and I'm not saying that we can completely erase or mitigate the traditional approach with the design approach. However, it offers a lot more opportunity. So firstly, when we start asking ourselves questions about what is the role that career plays in our lives, what do we want to get out of our work, what's important to us, we're looking at a bigger picture. We're looking at a holistic frame. And you can already see that this is question oriented. So this is not fixated on the solution. Through these questions, we also get a great sense of creative possibility. So we're no longer just limited to what are my skills, what jobs can I apply for based on these skills, but we start to see that if we look at the role of work within the context of our whole lives, it opens up a great deal more space. And we can start making connections across areas that maybe weren't available to us before, which also gets us much closer to what it is that we really want, not just what we think we need. And when we're engaging in a process that is focused on us, is about what we want, then we have agency. We feel like we're in control and in the driver's seat. And yes, I will say, control is an illusion. So this is not about, that inflexible or rigid aspect of control, or like we can fully create our own destiny, because we still have to be responsive to things in our environment. And though the more that we are working with what is in our environment and building toward what's next for us, the better we feel about ourselves, which continues to help us be in a place of not being stuck, of not being limited. And I don't know about you, but to me, that sounds like a lot more fun. So when we think about the whole life, and this is important as we then will go on to talk about the design thinking, whole life is a compendium of things. So sometimes we hear work life, and I think I even saw this back in the chat about assumptions or beliefs about work life. Well, what does that mean? Like when I hear that, I think, okay, work is half and life is half. It's like this 50-50 sort of equation. And they operate on two sides of a coin, but they don't work together at all. And so if I'm going in with that kind of assumption that work is something I do over here, life is something that I have over here, how is that going to dictate my actions? So the life wheel is a tool that we often use in coaching because it reveals all the elements of one's life. And this life wheel, you can see, has 10 different domains. I'm going to send you one, or rather Colleen or one of the terrific people at Museum Expert will send you one in follow-up to this. I think it has 8 points on it. You can add more, as many as you want. But again, it's really to visually represent the components that make up the entirety of one's life. And you can see how those parts may or may not interact with one another. For some people, spirituality and career might very much be interlinked. For others, career and recreation could be a connection, whereas for many of us, maybe recreation and spirituality are things that we do outside the space of work. However, it's a mechanism, again, to visually show kind of how full we feel each of these domains are. So when you get this and when you sit down with it, what I recommend doing is, filling out how full do you think this domain is to you? And not every domain has to be a 10. That's not the objective of this. We're not trying to create a complete element of fullness across, because some elements are less important to you than others. Perfectly okay. It's again to see the visual representation and then get an idea of, if I change this here, how does that affect this here? If I increase both of these domains, what does that look like? Maybe I need to contract one of the domains because too much of my time or energy is going there. And what I really want to do is spend more time here. So again, really just taking that step back and looking at our lives in a little different perspective and getting curious about it. So this is a tool for curiosity. Okay, but now we're really getting into the meat of this. So becoming a design thinker, these are the 5 mindsets that I promised. So the first mindset we've already engaged in, be curious. And the objective of curiosity is about inviting exploration. So the more curious we can get, the more we can probe at what our assumptions are, at what our beliefs are, at what we want, at what we need. We have the ability to create experiments around those things. And experimenting, ultimately, it's trying stuff. The purpose of the experiment is not necessarily success. Experiment is to test, to prototype, to try. And within experimentation, it is perfectly okay to fail. In fact, it's great to fail in an experiment because the effort that's been applied is fairly insignificant, but the learning that results is very significant. So you can either fail forward, you can succeed forward, but whatever you do in that space of trying things out, of testing, of experimentation, you are learning, which gives you the opportunity to be curious. Remember, we said before that the design process, it is non-linear and it is iterative. So these processes, this whole thing gets mixed up. Now, the reframing component occurs when we get stuck, or maybe when we did fail in that experiment. We were hoping for result A, instead we got result B. Shoot, now what? Tailspin. Now what do? I have to reframe. And let me give you just a little experience from my own life that might help illustrate this. So there was a time many years ago when I wanted to switch jobs. I wanted to get into nonprofit. I was working in healthcare at the time, and I was attracted to nonprofit because I had done some work previously on my values, on my beliefs, on my mission focus. I was very mission focused. So I thought, nonprofit would be great because I can align with the mission of the organization. So I shared this with a friend and she said, oh, how great. I know a bunch of people who run nonprofits. Let me connect you. Terrific. So she set me up with 5 different people. I had 5 interviews with CEOs around Columbus, Ohio. That's where I'm based. And they were wonderful conversations, the result of which was that I realized I did not want to be in nonprofit. I learned some things, importantly, that ultimately did not trump the ability to work at an organization of which I would be aligned to the mission. Things like career development was limited, only because, most nonprofits tend to be small. So the ability to rise up and advance tends to be limited. That the fundraising is critical no matter what your role is. And it was a little more volatile than I had hoped as an industry. However, through this simple experiment of being able to go out and talk to people, not even in the context of an interview, just to express interest and learn more, I had that opportunity to fail without having to actually try to get a position and then find out that it didn't work for me, which would ultimately have been far riskier and more time consuming. However, as the result of that, I still had to reframe that because I had my sights so set on nonprofit as an industry, and I was so sure that it was going to be perfect for me. So having to take that step back and reframe, I had to think about it in a new way. Like, well, what else do I enjoy? Or what is it about my current position that isn't resonating with me? Is it the mission? Is it the industry? Is it my job itself? Is it the environment? So I was able to go back, kind of reframe, do the experiments again. And then, long story short, and this seems more simple than it was, led me to where I am today, which is phenomenally fulfilling. But it was that process of iteration along the way that ultimately led me here and is really at the root of this entire design thinking mechanism. So knowing it's a process, just illustrated that, also allows us to let go a little bit from what we expect our result to be. So I was pretty hell-bent on, getting my foot in the door of a nonprofit. And to be totally honest, I was going to be the executive director. I mean, I was launching it. And though when I was able to let go of that expectation and instead go back to that space of curiosity, it was helpful to reframe, which again set me on a different course and ultimately led to where I am now. And then throughout this, all getting help, right? So without my friend who made those introductions for me, without other people, those individuals that I was able to interview, without my friends and people around me that I was asking these questions of, I wouldn't have been able to do any of this. And they also helped me see what I couldn't see and know what I didn't know, because there's only so much that we know ourselves. So that external perspective can be incredibly helpful to us and really give us that insight that maybe we can't glean on our own because we're limited by what we've always known and what's right in front of us. So I am going to pause there before we move on and just see if we have any questions. And I haven't actually looked at the chat. So Colleen, I assume you're there. Any questions? Anything popping up?
No, Heather, everybody had some really great contributions to our work beliefs, but everybody's just patiently listening and excited to hear what you're going to say next, I think.
All right, thanks. Well, then next is getting into this work. So I promised you that the best way to learn design theory is by doing design theory, building our way forward. And that really begins with this space of getting curious. And I know we've already done that a little bit at the beginning. And we are going to continue to do it because, as you probably noticed in my previous example, everything goes back to that space of curiosity. Everything goes back to the questions that we're asking about ourselves and about our situation. So this is the first breakout that I want to do here. And these are questions that might be questions you've asked yourself before, but maybe not. And so what I would like to invite everyone to do is to read this list of questions, and I will shut up in a second and give you a chance to do that. But read this list of questions and choose one that you want to answer. And then we're going to go into breakouts, and you're going to select the one that you want to answer, and you're going to respond. And then the rest of that group is going to be your design team. And it's going to probe a little bit more deeply and ask a couple follow-up questions. So we've got about 15 minutes for this exercise. And then we will come back together, share some insights that we've gleaned through this. But just, kind of manage time so we don't have a ton of time here. So I'm going to ask the facilitators to just keep an eye on that as we go into the breakouts. And that's it. And I'll be quiet now.
I'm going to organize the breakout room. So you give me 30 seconds for that. I'm going to create 4 rooms for people to go in. That's going to be assigned on a random basis. And so you just give me the time to assign the moderators or animators of our group to your group. So it's going to take 30 seconds.
So that'll give you time to read the questions here.
I will add that the questions have been copied into the chat too. So,
oh, great. Thank you.
So there is a small group where, oh no, okay, I'm good. I'm sorry.
There we go. Like to thank everyone for contributing in the breakout. So I know a couple of people dropped off the call, and for the brave souls who remained and engaged in the breakouts, I've heard a lot of great things come out of it. And I would really like to invite our facilitators to share a debrief so we can have a little context, both for the sake of the recording and other people's ability to glean something from this, as well as just to, be able to exchange that learning throughout the groups. So Rebecca, I see your face right there on my screen. So I wonder if you could share first from your breakout.
Sure. Well, we were really excited. We had a lot of participation. We had 3 brave souls that decided to share what questions connected that really sparked interest in them. And we spent a lot of our time talking about purpose and about meaning. So where do we personally feel our purpose is in its connection to work? So there were several educators in the group. So we talked about that connection to teaching others and transferring information. We also talked about being a part of something bigger than ourselves and being a part of an ecosystem where we're able to see the impact of our work. And then lastly, we had a really great finalizing conversation about connection, about how so much of our work, especially if you're public facing in museums, is about engaging with the public and what that has meant during times of COVID, when we have not been able to do that, and where we've been seeking that in other aspects of our life to continue to fuel that part of us that's needed and necessary. So thank you to everyone who's in breakout room 3. It was a great conversation.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that summary. Who's next? Alexis, would you like to share some takeaways from your breakout?
Sure. So, we had a lot of commonality in our group in terms of, kind of talking about some of the challenges and big changes that we've all faced, recently, and some of those being intentional changes that people are trying to make in their lives, and others that were less. That were somewhat forced upon us, and I think we can all relate to that. And so we talked about kind of how having those changes really gives you an opportunity to evaluate a lot of these questions in your overall lifestyle. And we talked about different ways to kind of face those obstacles head on, and look at those as opportunities to think about the value that we offer and how we can be creative and think outside the box. We talked a little bit about the perspective of getting feedback from others, and seeing your skills and your value through others' eyes, and how that can be really valuable in that process as well. And then we closed in talking about, kind of some of the things that bring us fulfillment and make our hearts sing, and really kind of thinking about how and I think one of the themes we saw was that some of them are COVID silver linings, if you will. That was our, we had a really great discussion, and really wonderful feedback on each other's, kind of thoughts and feelings. So thank you all.
Thank you. Sounds like a nice community building experience. Rita?
Yes, hi. So breakout room 1 rocked. And we had some really just very nice conversation. We centered mostly on 2 questions. One is looking at the new life, creating a new life and how to make that meaningful. And then also what makes your heart sing? And those seem to be 2 very different questions, but they came together in a very interesting way, where it's about the people and it's about relationships, and it's relationships among individuals, it's relationships with the institutions, it's being connected to the culture of organizations that maybe we're not part of anymore, or not going to be part of, and how do we keep those kind of connections. But when it came down to it, more than anything was interpersonal relationships, and we heard words like inspiration and hope, and I think it was a pretty good discussion and pretty good connections.
Awesome, thank you. And Jody.
Hi, Heather. I don't think I've said hello to you today. Hello.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Yes. Group 4 were very brave, were very They were good listeners. They built off of each other, which was nice. And so our two questions were, how does the way you live your life reflect your values? And the second was, what makes your heart sing? Overall, we talked about how revisiting our original career decisions when we were younger, what that told us about our values and strengths and how we wanted to use them. And some were noticing that there's been kind of a thread, even though they thought that looked like this, it wasn't. And so as they looked though over their career, there was kind of this thread of that meaning happening. And they have been thinking, and they really want to spotlight that more. And so that's informing, I think, some people on career moves. We also talked about, there were some words that I heard a few times that people built on when they heard it. And so lifelong learning, integrated learning. So bringing in, the arts and sciences, or science and arts, design, and all that. Service to others. I heard that several times. And inspiring curiosity with that lifelong learning. One person said that they know they want to be a lifelong learner. They are a lifelong learner, and they want to inspire others. Some of it, they wanted to make sure that, people were engaged in learning, especially our younger folks. And so then the other thing that we talked about was that we just needed more time. Okay. Our checkout question, as I called it, to use Heather's language, was about, how did this go? And they said, fine, we just want more time. And then on a final note, this is more me than probably anybody else, but someone said the word cultivate, and I thought, I miss hearing the word cultivate. Like, I feel like so many museum, mission statements or, whatever has the word cultivate in it. And I don't have that word enough used in my life right now. That was great. Thank you, group.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the summary from everyone. And, it sounds like a couple takeaways that grabbed me are the focus on the positivity and what's possible. And I think, sometimes when we've been thrust into situations, especially ones that we didn't plan for, right? The unplanned transitions where we lost a job, we were furloughed, something happened to our health, something happened to our family, and now suddenly our life is upended. It can be really hard to find that space of possibility. And, it's not necessarily always akin to positivity, because we have to reconcile the things that are happening to us. But being able to reframe that, have the resilience, find the possibility within that through these techniques of design, I think can help us continue, again, to build our way forward. And I think the point that, or something that I'm hearing too a little bit, is that focus not necessarily on the end all be all, but on what's right in front of us, and then what's next. So what's the next best step? Sure, it'd be great to be a CEO or something. Is that the next best step? Is that even feasible? No, probably not. And though, we have a lot that we can draw from. So I love hearing that sense of possibility. To continue to build on that, and also for our Jody's group who wanted more time, good news, more time is coming. Little different question, but we're going to go back into a breakout. So I'm not going to share my slide because it's just, one little slide before we go back into breakout. So I'll just keep talking here for a second. But the next thing to consider still is within this place of being curious. And this is where we loop back to the things that we put in the chat. So those beliefs that we hold about work. So somebody mentioned lifelong learning. I think that came out of Jody's group. And then we know we have some educators from Rebecca's group, and I'm sure in other groups as well. So I imagine pretty much everyone here is a great learner. We are super, super good at learning things, learning new things. What we often as humans struggle with is unlearning. So unlearning is sometimes we have beliefs, we have truths, we know things, they have served us well in the past, but they're no longer working for us. And so we need to unlearn them. We need to unlearn our approach to the way that we're dealing with our problems. You know, this is going right back to that Einstein quote about the new level of consciousness. And also, I think it's also the Einstein quote, if we keep doing the same thing that we've always done, expecting a definition or different result, that's the definition of insanity, right? So, so this is the opportunity to unlearn. So what I would like to ask everyone to do is we're going to go back into breakout rooms. I do believe they're going to be different this time around. So you'll get to see some new faces, maybe some of the same. And look back to those beliefs, either the ones that you put down for yourself, or maybe something in that chat sparked something in you that is really resonating. And the question here is, how is this serving me, or how might it no longer be serving me? And this starts to get into the reframing piece, because if we're seeing something that is no longer serving us, we need to reframe that. So I'm going to ask everyone again, take a look at the chat, and I'm going to ask Walter to come back and do his, wonderful Zoom magic and put everybody into breakout rooms. And then we will continue this conversation a little bit with respect to reframing some beliefs that might not be working for us. Our facilitators to, and Jody might have left already. I know she had to go. But at least if we could hear from maybe Rita and Rebecca. Oh, Jody is here.
And then I'll jump
Oh,
off.
perfect. There you are.
That's okay.
All right, go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And everyone in my group, thank you so much. And I'm sorry we didn't get to talk a little more. And I think I probably talked a little more than I should have, but there was so much that was coming out of it that I think a lot of us connected to. One was we talked about balance and the importance of balance, and how someone said that looking at balance in a bigger context, and that sometimes it's not always about, do I have balance in this month or in this season or in this year? It's in my whole life. And that, right, like life has different seasons. I thought that was very interesting. And then also thinking about the how your identity is so part of your career sometimes, that it becomes so much part of your career that you truly don't know who you are if you are not doing that. And I personally have felt that, and I really appreciated this person being so vulnerable and saying that. And then also someone was talking about how they had started with something else, a content area, that they were able to move over to a museum educator position. And now they're probably going to have to go to a science, or, a corporate position again, and they're having some tough times with that. And so what we kind of ended on was this idea of, what does it mean? Is it a story that we're telling ourselves that we're going backwards because we are changing to a sector that we came from? Is that something that we just need to reframe? We are not the same person that we're going back to. We don't have to be that same person. It's just an environment that we may be a little familiar with, and what can we get out of it then? So I hope that helped capture what I heard. And if anyone else has something to say from that group, please correct me. But it's been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jody. And I know you have to go get your child now. Appreciate you being here. How about Alexis? You want to do a really quick report out of what the conversation was in your group?
Yeah, absolutely. So group 2, we talked a bit about some similar themes that Jody shared in terms of really the beliefs around your career and your work defining you, and especially in the nonprofit, museum, education sector, and really identifying with the enrichment of the community and the greater good through your work. And so there was some really great kind of reframing about how all the different aspects that we have all been through, and our unique experiences and the twists and turns in our roads really kind of bring us a unique perspective that we can offer to the world as a whole. And sometimes that's in the sense of career, sometimes it's in other ways, but really thinking about some of the cultural expectations and pushing back a little bit and just acknowledging the cultural expectations that have been put on us to define ourselves through work, and how we can, really kind of reframe that as well. So there's some really great conversation, but similar to the last time, we felt like, oh, we need more time to talk through this. So really looking forward to additional opportunities to continue to lift each other up and help each other see how we can reframe these definitions and beliefs about our identities and our careers.
That's awesome. And I think I heard something akin to work equals identity in both Rebecca and Rita's breakouts as well. I got to spend a couple seconds there. So Rita, would you like to go ahead and share?
Sure, thanks. We really were talking about kind of work. One of the beliefs is work should be fulfilling, and lots of different words that could be used there, but I think that's the one that probably describes it best. And then transitions, we have somebody in the group who's transitioning in late career, and we have somebody in the group who's transitioning very, very early. And in transitions, the things, I can't remember who said it, so but the things that made you feel good before are going to be different. And so how do you know? How do you feel? How do you know whether or not you're fulfilled or you're doing well and that? And so really started to have some conversation about reframing that, rethinking that, what is fulfilling, and having that holistic view of it, that maybe it will take time for work or career to serve that purpose in your life. And what can you do? How can you rethink that so that you're looking at it more holistically?
Awesome. Thank you. Connecting right back to that life wheel. All right. And Rebecca, can you?
Yeah, I can.
Also,
we touched on a couple of the things that have already been shared, but I think that part of it was talking about, how in your career do you transition and shift when you're wanting to take either a different approach to how you've been trained, or a multifaceted or multidisciplined approach, and like how you can reaffirm to yourself that learning is growing, and growth sometimes is hard and uncomfortable, but it's possible. And then we had a really interesting conversation about what we as museum professionals accept as normal behavior, so that we accept lower wages, we accept poor working conditions, and where's the agency that you can take, where is your agency to make those changes? And we talked a lot about workplace culture, and right at the end, our conversation was just getting good. I think, we were really hitting on, it comes down to personal responsibility of everyone in whatever leadership position you are in, and that you make the active choice to be a leader, which means advocating for fair wages for your direct reports and employees, thinking about that team-based culture that you are creating, that might not shape, shift, and change in big ways the institution, but at least it can create, a healthy workspace for your direct employees within your umbrella. So those were kind of the big things that we were talking on. And the last one, I personally shared my own limiting belief that I had to get over as a trained educator, of that I'm just an educator. I often felt that I really had to sell people on my skill sets, and I had to get over that. And it's like, educators are amazing and should be leaders of institutions, and they're better than everyone else. I had to go to the opposite, get a real big ego about myself to kind of then get back into the middle of educators aren't just educators. We don't just work with kids. We have a lot of different skill sets that some of our colleagues in the museum field could really benefit from learning from the way in which we approach our work.
that is awesome. And that is such a lovely segue into the remaining couple slides I have for you here. So this all leads right into trying stuff. Now that we've identified some of these things for ourselves, what do you want to explore in more depth, and how can you create an experiment around that? Whether it's the culture shift that we were talking about, the reframe as an educator and what you have to offer, how can you design that? And if you're not sure, what would a prototype look like? And if you're really not sure even what you're prototyping, you can ask yourself questions like, if I knew I wasn't going to fail, what would I do? Or what do I think about doing, but I'm too scared to try? Those really big picture kinds of questions, like if I won the lottery tomorrow, what would I do? And that is not necessarily the next thing. However, it is a place for further reflection around what it is you want to contribute, what you want to give, where you can create that space of prototyping and experimentation. So I don't have to say anything on this slide because Rebecca summed it up so perfectly. The learning and the unlearning, and that change comes from that place of discomfort. I think we all know that, but sometimes it's nice to be reminded of it. And, again, this is about iteration. This is not figuring out what to do with my life. Like there is just one singular thing. There is a next thing, a next step, a next better thing that you can do to enhance the quality of your life. And then lastly, what you all demonstrated so beautifully in those breakouts is this concept of collaboration. Designers are not lone wolves. They are pack animals. Even all the wonderful designs we have, my fabulous Android phone, all of this came as the result of people working together. You can do this. You can form a design group. The book, Designing Your Life, recommends how to do that and gives a guideline for that. There's an opportunity that will be forthcoming via Museum Expert to do that. I offer things such as that. So there's a lot of ways in which you can continue to engage in this and seek the help that you need. And with that, I just want to thank you very, very much. You were completely delightful, super engaged. The facilitators, Alexis, Jody, Rebecca, Rita, thank you. Thank you again to Walter, Colleen, and Rita for helping me understand and flesh this out. And with that, oh, thank you. I see Colleen left a couple little notes here. Perfect. Any last questions? I know Walter wanted to say a couple words as well. No, maybe I could look at the chat.
Yeah, and we're looking at the time, so we're very
Great.
close to the end of the session. So, well, and I of course, I want to thank you, Heather, for this amazing hour and a half that we just spent in such an active way to continue building the Museum Expert community, because this is so one of these important things for us, is that we are listening to our members, and we're trying to bring them tools that they can really use in helping them in the situation in which they are. And so thanks for doing that. Thanks to Colleen and Rita again for bringing together everything and every single aspect of this. There's a lot of work going into this. These are two of the pillars of Museum Expert, and I really appreciate the work they do to bring these things together. And then finally, an announcement maybe at this point is that you have met briefly or not, if you were in the group, with two new Museum Expert volunteers, Rebecca Harding and Alexis Klein. They were two of the moderators, and with them, we are building a program, a multiple week program, similar to this, where you will be able, and people, Museum Expert members will be able to organize in self-organizing groups and get a program for several weeks to continue the conversation like this and helping you in designing your career, whether it is in a museum or outside or whatever. More on this very soon, but we will, with the recording, we will send out a registration list for those who are interested. You can already put your name in there. We will keep you in mind, but there is going to be much more information on that in the weeks to come. And we're really looking forward to deliver something substantial for you for free. Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Okay,
Wanna
fantastic.
Click off the
Thank you.
recording, Walter.
Oh, yeah.